Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 17 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be sardines, and today is a chest training workout. And the theme for today's workout is assisted PNF stretching. So right now, I'm going to be demonstrating how to perform contract relax PNF stretching. Now let's get started. And while we're resting, let's continue with the demonstration of the contract relax PNF method. Now that we've worked on the flexors, extensors, abductors, and adductors of the hip, what we can do just to get it a little bit more lubricated is a little bit more circumduction. And we can also do some flexion and extension. So for the flexion and extension, what we could do, a couple different methods. One, we could just, once again, place the Achilles on our shoulder, and we could just go forward and backward into flexion and extension and just keep going back. This is going to help to build up the synovial fluid in the joint. The synovial fluid, once again, is the fluid that keeps the joint nice and lubricated. And this is going to reduce any friction. So if they have a lot of impingements in the hip, the more circumduction you do, the better it's going to feel. Then, if you don't want to do it that way, again, we could just place one hand at the distal femur, one hand at the calcaneus, and we could just rock back and forth, back and forth. That would be for the flexion and extension. The other thing is we could also just do your basic circumduction. For the basic circumduction, again, we place the hand on the shoulder or the foot on the shoulder and do our clockwise circumduction, do a few in that direction. Then we can reverse the direction, go counterclockwise. We could do the same thing with the hand positioning. If you prefer, one hand at the distal femur, one hand at the calcaneus. We could go clockwise for a few repetitions, counterclockwise for a few repetitions. And then we could also get a little bit more creative and do the figure eights. With the figure eights, what we would want to do, again, we are going into medial rotation of the femur as we go into adduction by bringing it across, and we want to scour the hip. So we want to trace that hip, and then as we get to the center, we're going to start going into lateral rotation and abduction by bringing it out to the side. Then we want to maintain that lateral rotation as we come across into adduction. And then we would start going into medial rotation at the bottom of the eighth. And then we would maintain that medial rotation as we go into abduction and adduction. And once again, if you wanted to perform this with the one hand on the calcaneus and one hand on the femur, you would just go distal femur, calcaneus, medial rotation and adduction by pushing it across. Then we would scour the hip, really trace that hip, feel it. Then we'd go into lateral rotation, abduction. We maintain that lateral rotation as we go into adduction. And then as we get to the bottom, we would start to go into lateral rotation and abduction and keep it in. And then in real time, it would be something like this. And this hip is a lot looser than Johnny's left hip. I was having a little bit of trouble with Johnny's left hip. But that is basically how we would perform the circumduction. With regard to all of these motions, one thing worth noting is depending on how your goal when you are performing the stretch, that's going to dictate how exactly you would perform it with regard to the speed and the intensity. If you are performing it on an athlete prior to an event to get them ready, we want to upregulate the nervous system. So your movements are going to be a lot quicker and your contractions are going to be a lot quicker. If we are performing it after an event to calm them down, we want to bring down the nervous system. So what we would want to do is downregulate their body by going slower. We're going to do a lot slower contractions. We're going to hold it for longer, and we're going to hold them in the stretch for a lot longer. But that is how the difference between doing it prior to an event and after, and by if we want to upregulate or downregulate the nervous system. But our rest period is up. Time for the seventh and final set. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.